From Wall Street tycoons to charming con artists, Ponzi schemes have been one of the most audacious forms of financial fraud in U.S. history. In this gripping documentary, we'll dive into 10 of the most astonishing Ponzi schemes that captivated the nation, leaving behind a trail of shattered dreams, stolen fortunes, and lives forever changed. From get-rich-quick promises to elaborate webs of deceit, these schemes lured thousands of unsuspecting victims, sometimes over decades, with the illusion of easy money. Prepare to uncover the psychological tricks and brazen manipulation that made these masterminds legends of crime, and left the public wondering, how did they get away with it for so long? Charles Ponzi, the original mastermind. Charles Ponzi was born in 1882 in the small Italian town of Lugo, where he grew up in a modest family. Ambitious and driven by dreams of wealth, Ponzi emigrated to the United States in 1903, chasing the promise of prosperity and success. His early years in America, however, were marked by a series of failed ventures and brushes with the law, which foreshadowed the infamy that would later define his life. After a stint in Canada, where he was jailed for forging a check, Ponzi returned to the United States, undeterred and more determined than ever to make his mark. Little did anyone know, he was on the brink of orchestrating a scheme so audacious that it would forever etch his name into the annals of finance. Ponzi's grand scheme involved international postal reply coupons, which were used in the early 20th century to prepay postage for international mail. He realized that these coupons could be bought cheaply in countries with depreciated currencies and then redeemed at face value in the US, yielding an impressive profit margin. Ponzi promised investors a 50% return on their money in just 45 days and 100% in 90 days. His promise of unbelievable returns spread like wildfire, drawing in thousands of eager investors. For a while, Ponzi made good on his promises, paying early investors with the funds provided by new ones, creating the illusion of a successful and legitimate business. However, the entire scheme relied on a constant influx of new money. When the inevitable happened, and he could no longer attract enough new investors, the house of cards came tumbling down. Ponzi's empire collapsed in 1920, costing his investors over $20 million, a staggering sum at the time. His downfall sent shockwaves through the financial world, giving rise to the term Ponzi scheme as a lasting reminder of his fraudulent legacy. Bernie Madoff, the biggest Ponzi scheme in history. Bernie Madoff, once revered as a titan of Wall Street, started his career with a modest investment firm in 1960, which he built with the help of family and close friends. Over the decades, Madoff's firm gained a sterling reputation, eventually managing the money of elite investors, charitable foundations, and even financial institutions. His influence grew so significant that he served as the chairman of the NASDAQ stock exchange. To the outside world, Madoff epitomized financial success and trustworthiness. But beneath this polished facade lay the largest Ponzi scheme in history, a fraudulent empire that would ultimately defraud investors of an estimated $65 billion. Madoff's scheme was shockingly simple in its execution, yet monumental in scale. He promised consistent, above-average returns through what he claimed was a unique split-strike conversion strategy. Investors believed that Madoff's uncanny ability to navigate the market's highs and lows was the secret to their steady profits. In reality, no investments were being made. Instead, Madoff used funds from new investors to pay the returns of earlier investors, creating an illusion of profitability. As long as he continued to attract new clients, the deception held. However, the financial crisis of 2008 triggered a wave of redemption requests that Madoff could not fulfill, leading to the scheme's spectacular unraveling. When the truth emerged, it devastated thousands of investors, including prominent celebrities, charities, and even Holocaust survivors. The aftermath was a financial and emotional catastrophe, with many victims losing their life savings. Madoff was arrested, tried, and sentenced to 150 years in prison, marking a dramatic fall from grace for the man who had once been the trusted steward of billions. His betrayal shattered trust in the financial system and left an indelible scar on countless lives. Alan Stanford, the $7 billion fraud. Alan Stanford, once a larger-than-life figure in the world of finance, built a vast financial empire that spanned the Caribbean and the United States. Born in Texas in 1950, Stanford started his career with a string of small businesses before moving to the Caribbean, where he established Stanford International Bank, SIB, on the island of Antigua. With a charismatic persona and an image of success, he attracted wealthy investors from around the globe, promising them safe, high-yield returns on certificates of deposit, CDs. Stanford's charm and the allure of his offshore bank painted a picture of stability and wealth, earning him accolades and a knighthood from the Antiguan government. For 2 decades, Stanford lived a lavish lifestyle, owning private jets, yachts, and a sprawling portfolio of properties, while his bank's reputation continued to grow. However, the reality behind Stanford's empire was far from the gilded image he projected. He used SIB as a vehicle to run a massive Ponzi scheme, selling fraudulent CDs that purportedly invested in a diversified portfolio of assets. In truth, Stanford was using new investors' money to pay returns to earlier investors, similar to the scheme orchestrated by Charles Ponzi nearly a century earlier. To keep regulators and investors at bay, he relied on falsified financial statements and a network of corrupt officials. The scheme began to unravel in 2009 when the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, launched an investigation leading to Stanford's arrest and the collapse of his empire. He was convicted in 2012 on multiple counts of fraud and sentenced to 110 years in prison. The fallout from Stanford's fraud was devastating, with over 18,000 investors from around the world losing their savings. The scandal also cast a harsh light on the regulation of offshore banks and the financial industry's vulnerability to such massive frauds, leaving a lasting impact on investor confidence. Tom Petters was once known as a prominent entrepreneur and philanthropist in Minnesota, with a business portfolio that included well-known electronics retailers such as Polaroid and Fingerhut. He built a reputation as a savvy businessman who could revive failing companies, and his success story made him a respected figure in the corporate world. However, beneath the veneer of legitimate enterprise, Petters was orchestrating one of the largest Ponzi schemes in U.S. history. Starting in the late 1990s, he used his network of companies to create the illusion of a thriving business empire, soliciting investments under the pretense of purchasing consumer electronics for resale to major retailers like Costco and Sam's Club. These investments, he promised, would yield high returns due to the lucrative nature of his wholesale operations. In reality, there were no such transactions. Petters fabricated documents, including purchase orders and bank statements, to convince investors that their money was being used for legitimate business purposes. He then used the funds from new investors to pay off earlier ones, sustaining the facade for nearly a decade. The scheme unraveled in 2008 when a whistleblower from within Petters' organization came forward, leading to an FBI investigation. During his trial, it was revealed that the supposed $3.65 billion in retail deals were completely fictitious. Petters was convicted on multiple counts of fraud and money laundering and was sentenced to 50 years in prison. The collapse of his empire left hundreds of investors, including major hedge funds and charitable foundations, grappling with substantial losses. Efforts to recover the lost funds have been ongoing, but the case remains a stark reminder of the catastrophic impact that one man's greed can have on countless lives and the importance of rigorous due diligence in the investment world. Scott Rothstein, the lawyer who sold lies. Scott Rothstein was once the epitome of success in the legal world, a charismatic and high-profile lawyer in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, who built a prestigious law firm from the ground up. Known for his flamboyant lifestyle, Rothstein was often seen rubbing shoulders with politicians, celebrities, and business moguls. He was a man who seemed to have it all, from luxury cars to opulent real estate, projecting an image of untouchable prosperity. But beneath the veneer of legitimacy, Rothstein was perpetrating one of the most audacious Ponzi schemes in legal history, leveraging his position and reputation to ensnare investors in a web of lies that would eventually unravel spectacularly. Rothstein's scheme revolved around selling investments in fictitious legal settlements. He convinced investors that they could buy into settlements of sexual harassment and whistleblower cases, which were supposedly confidential and required quick, lump sum payments to plaintiffs in exchange for steep discounts on the settlement's full value. Investors were promised high returns, often exceeding 20% in a matter of months. In reality, these settlements did not exist. Rothstein used the funds from new investors to pay earlier ones, all the while falsifying bank statements, forging documents, and using his law firm's resources to perpetuate the fraud. His scheme unraveled in 2009 when the flow of new investments dried up, leading to his firm's collapse and Rothstein's subsequent arrest. He pleaded guilty to running a $1.2 billion Ponzi scheme and was sentenced to 50 years in prison. The scandal rocked the legal community, highlighting vulnerabilities in oversight and ethics within the profession, and eroded trust among investors who had believed their funds were safe in the hands of a respected attorney. Gerald Payne, the Greater Ministries International Scam. Gerald Payne was a charismatic preacher who founded Greater Ministries International, GMI, in the early 1990s, a religious organization based in Tampa, Florida. Presenting himself as a man of God, Payne attracted thousands of followers with promises of spiritual salvation and financial prosperity. He preached the gospel of double blessings, claiming that donations to his ministry would not only be divinely rewarded, but would also be doubled through savvy investments in precious metals, international trade, and charitable projects. Payne's message resonated deeply with many, particularly elderly and devout individuals seeking both financial security and spiritual fulfillment. However, behind the facade of religious piety, Payne was orchestrating a massive Ponzi scheme that preyed on the trust and faith of his followers. Under the guise of religious faith, Payne and his associates deceived over 18,000 investors into contributing to what they thought was a righteous cause, ultimately amassing $448 million. The promised returns were, of course, paid using the funds from new investors, a classic Ponzi structure that relied on a constant influx of new money. The scheme began to fall apart in 1998 when federal authorities started investigating GMI's financial activities. The subsequent trial revealed the extent of Payne's deceit, leading to his conviction on charges of fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering. He was sentenced to 27 years in prison, and several of his associates also received lengthy sentences. The case of Greater Ministries International serves as a sobering reminder of how easily religion can be manipulated to exploit the vulnerable. It shattered the lives of many who had placed their faith and life savings in Payne's hands, exposing the devastating impact of religiously motivated financial scams on communities and individuals. Lou Pearlman, the boy band mogul's double life. Lou Pearlman was a towering figure in the music industry during the late 1990s and early 2000s, credited with launching some of the most iconic boy bands of the era, including NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys. Known for his knack for spotting and developing talent, Pearlman crafted a pop music empire that defined a generation and produced countless chart-topping hits. With his larger-than-life persona and success in the entertainment world, he became a prominent figure, often seen at industry events and praised for his business acumen. However, while Pearlman was making headlines for his musical triumphs, he was also living a shadowy double life, orchestrating one of the most complex and far-reaching Ponzi schemes in U.S. history. Pearlman's financial empire was built on a web of lies involving a fictitious airline company called Transcontinental Airlines. He convinced investors, including friends, family, and even members of his bands, to put their money into what he claimed were safe, high-yield investments in the airline. In reality, the airline existed only on paper, supported by fake financial statements and non-existent assets. Pearlman used funds from new investors to pay off earlier ones, all while maintaining the facade of a successful businessman. His scheme ultimately amassed over $300 million before it began to unravel in 2006, when regulators and investors grew suspicious of the too-good-to-be-true returns. Following a lengthy investigation, Pearlman fled the country but was eventually captured in Indonesia in 2007. He was convicted of fraud and sentenced to 25 years in prison. His downfall sent shockwaves through both the entertainment and financial worlds, illustrating the dangers of unchecked ambition and the blurred lines that can sometimes exist between legitimate business and outright fraud. Reed Slatkin, the Scientologist swindler. Reed Slatkin, a co-founder of the pioneering internet service provider Earthlink, was once a revered figure in both the technology and Scientology communities. His role in Earthlink's success earned him a reputation as a savvy entrepreneur, and his deep ties to the Church of Scientology positioned him as a trusted financial advisor among its members. Slatkin claimed to manage investment funds that provided extraordinary returns, attracting a network of high-profile clients, including celebrities and fellow Scientologists. However, what appeared to be a lucrative investment opportunity was, in fact, a massive Ponzi scheme that would ultimately defraud investors of over $600 million. Slatkin's scheme involved creating the illusion of a successful investment portfolio by fabricating account statements and using money from new investors to pay supposed returns to earlier ones. For years, he managed to maintain the charade, bolstered by the trust he garnered from his connections within Scientology and the tech community. The scheme began to fall apart in 2001 when the SEC launched an investigation into his activities. Faced with mounting pressure, Slatkin filed for bankruptcy, revealing the true extent of his fraudulent operations. He was subsequently charged with multiple counts of fraud and money laundering, leading to a 14-year prison sentence. The Slatkin case underscored the perilous mix of religion, technology, and finance, showing how the confluence of these elements can create a perfect storm for financial deception. His betrayal left a lasting scar on the victims, many of whom were his close friends and fellow believers, and highlighted the importance of skepticism and transparency, even when investments come from trusted sources. Philip Barry, a soft-spoken financial advisor from Brooklyn, New York, quietly orchestrated one of the longest-running Ponzi schemes in U.S. history. Over the course of more than 30 years, he defrauded investors of over $40 million through his firm, Leverage Group. Promising modest but steady returns from investments in real estate and other ventures, Barry built a loyal client base primarily from his local community. His scheme thrived on his reputation as a trustworthy, down-to-earth advisor, allowing him to avoid detection for decades. Unlike more flamboyant fraudsters, Barry kept his promises believable, which helped him maintain the facade of legitimacy far longer than most Ponzi operators. The scheme began to unravel during the economic downturn of 2008, when many investors sought to withdraw their funds. With no real investments to back up his promises, Barry's operation collapsed under scrutiny. He was arrested in 2009 and in 2010, convicted and sentenced to 20 years in prison. The impact on his victims was profound, as many were longtime clients, friends, and neighbors who had trusted him with their life savings. The betrayal left the local community reeling, not just from the financial loss, but from the deep personal breach of trust. Barry's case serves as a stark reminder that even small-scale local schemes can have devastating consequences when built on a foundation of deceit and betrayal. As we've seen, the audacity of these Ponzi schemes not only drained bank accounts but also exploited the hopes and trust of countless people. Though many of these masterminds are now behind bars, their impact continues to ripple through communities and financial systems. But perhaps the most astonishing part of these tales isn't just the vast amounts of money stolen. It's how deeply they reveal human vulnerability to deception and greed. As long as there's a promise of easy wealth, there will always be those who dare to exploit it. Keep your guard up, because the next great con could be just around the corner.